Hi everyone and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to talk about the shipyard specification that's being implemented in Keptn 0.8.0-alpha based on the Keptn Spec 0.2.0-alpha. Please note that some things that you see here might break for the final version of Keptn 0.8.0-alpha, but I believe that most of the things that we're talking about here will be valid for the final version. Alright, just a quick intro in case you don't know Keptn itself yet. Please visit the website Keptn.sh. Take a look at the source code at github.com/Keptn/Keptn. And in short, Keptn is an event-based control plane that allows use cases like continuous delivery, automated operations, and quality gates. Okay, also, again, disclaimer, this is work in progress. Please expect breaking changes, but unless you see a new video, like for 0.8.0 final, I'm pretty sure this video will be valid. So, while implementing use cases like continuous delivery, quality gates, and remediation or self-healing with Keptn, we always felt the urge to allow users to not just modify existing workflows, but also define their own workflows. Our goal was to not create another workflow engine, but we wanted to create a customizable event-based control plane with continuous delivery and automated operations in mind. So what you see here is our shipyard format that we've had with Keptn 0.7 and older, or with Keptn Spec 0.1.x. This shipyard format defined multiple stages and as well as the way how to deploy on the stage, like the deployment strategy here or a test strategy for tests, and even approval and remediation strategy. This format allowed users to define a set of stages and for each of the stages specify the set strategies. However, you couldn't customize it. Like, what if I want to add another step, or what if I want a different deployment strategy, and how do I implement it, and what do I do, and which service is affected? So all questions that came up, but you haven't been able to answer them with this format. In addition, like all the tasks and workflows behind the deployment and testing and evaluation and remediation, they were defined implicitly. And it's better to have them defined explicitly so you can actually modify them, which is also one of the key features that lacked in this specification. And last but not least, the stages linked here, it's always from top to bottom, and you haven't been able to do anything else. So you can't do parallel stages, you can't skip a stage. Wasn't possible. To fix that, we are introducing the new shipyard format, which is introduced by Keptn Spec 0.2.0-alpha. And we've also described it in this Keptn enhancement proposal in case you're interested. So essentially, what does this new spec look like? First of all, it looks a little bit like a Kubernetes manifest, but it definitely is not. It's just meant to look like it because we think the format of a manifest is well known to the users of Keptn, or at least it should be. It's not a custom resource yet. We might go that way in a later version, but not at the moment. So it starts to look quite similar like the old format, like you can define stages in here, but other than that, the similarities will change quite quickly. So first of all, basically we define a stage, but within that stage we then define a sequence. For instance, this is an artifact delivery sequence which then consists of several tasks like deployment, test, evaluation, and release. Each of those tasks is then executed by a Keptn service or even a third-party service, and then you just go back and continue with the next stage with the same sequence. One of the main ideas of this shipyard file, however, is to be technology independent. Therefore, we don't configure things like file names or technology specific parameters within the shipyard file. So like the property here, deployment strategy, it still says deployment strategy direct. We don't care who deploys it at this point. Like Helm service might deploy it, but there might also be a different service for deployment. We just want to have the attribute deployment strategy, and that's it. The same is true for tests with the JMeter service. We don't actually say JMeter run the tests in a functional mode. We just say we want to run tests with functional tests in mind. We will see this in an example later. So how does the old Shipyard format compare, or actually how do you migrate from the old Shipyard format to the new one? First of all, there will be a CLI command to upgrade the old Shipyard to the new format. But essentially, this is what it looks like. So the stage name stays as it is. Deployment strategy is now a property of the deployment task. Test strategy is a property of the test task. And in addition, the existing artifact delivery or configuration change, what it was called in the old version, is now made as an explicit sequence here with the aforementioned tasks. This is also true for the other stages, but it might look a little bit different depending on what you have defined, like remediation strategy or approval strategy. Okay, back to the task itself now. We have a task called deployment, we have a task called test, and this is a major difference now to the new version here. The deployment is being triggered with a sh.keptn.event.deployment triggered cloud event, and test is being triggered with a similar cloud event. We here take the name of the task and put it in the middle of this cloud event type. And so essentially, let's say I want to trigger tests. What does the cloud event look like? It's a simplified version here, so if you're familiar with cloud events, then you should be fine. If not, please take a look at the Keptn Spec. There is many of examples of the cloud events in there. For now, what you need to know is the test itself, the name test, is being put into the type with a source of Shipyard controller, because Shipyard controller is now the central point where you will trigger certain tasks, and the test strategy itself is within the data payload. This is a reserved space with the same name as the task. We also introduced a new set of cloud events. So for instance, for each task we have sh.keptn.taskName.triggered.started and status changed, as well as finished. The rule of thumb here is Shipyard controller always sends the .triggered event, and some Keptn service that responds on this event needs to respond or acknowledge even with a .started event. It can send an optional status changed, and it must send a .finished event in the end when it's done. This is also being visualized in this little sequence diagram here. Again, Shipyard controller sends the .triggered event to nuts. This is retrieved by some Keptn service via nuts. The Keptn service needs to acknowledge that it has retrieved the .triggered event with a .started event, which is then retrieved in the end by Shipyard controller, and the Shipyard controller takes a mental note that the task has started. In the meantime, the Keptn service that's reacted is doing whatever it does. It might send an optional status changed event for just for your information, like, hey, I'm working, but give me like another minute or so. It's not required, this is just optional. And when it is done with whatever it was doing, it sends the .finished event, which again is retrieved by Shipyard controller via nuts. And then Shipyard controller can say, okay, I'm done. So what does this look like in terms of cloud events again? We've already seen a triggered event. The triggered event is being sent by Shipyard controller with an ID and an sh-keptn context. This ID needs to be put into the triggered ID of the started event sent by Helm service. The sh-keptn context needs to be copied, obviously, and then this is just going to be sent. In the meantime, the service is working, and once it's done, it needs to send a deployment or a .finished event. Again, this is being sent by Helm service. This again has the triggered ID and the sh-keptn context. The triggered ID is really important. I can't stress this out enough, because this is the way for Shipyard controller to link a .triggered cloud event with the .started and .finished cloud event. Also, what's nice to see here is the data attribute, which has a deployment attribute, which has some properties set by Helm service. This is going to be transferred back to Shipyard controller and going to be transferred to the other services later, which we will see. Okay, so this deployment finished event is now retrieved by Shipyard controller. Shipyard controller looks into the Shipyard and it sees, okay, after deployment, we have test. So let's trigger a test by sending a test.triggered event. And again, the SH Keptn context needs to be copied because this is one sequence and the sequence is identified by this Keptn context. We copy the data of the deployment event that we had. So this is just copied over, and we're adding the test field here with test strategy functional because it was defined here as a property. And then everything starts working again, in this case in JMeter service. JMeter service will have to send a .started event, run its test, send a finished event, and so on. There are some restrictions I want to talk about for task names. Please make sure they're lowercase a to c. I think you can use uppercase, but I just don't recommend it because it just doesn't fit into the style. You can also use numbers if you really want to, as well as dots and hyphens. Please don't use any other special characters or spaces or Unicode characters. I'm pretty sure things will break. There are some task names that are reserved for Keptn internal usage. Like action, approval, deployment, evaluation, release, remediation, test, and some other internal tasks that I don't want to bother you about. You can use them if you really want to, but I recommend defining your own tasks. So what are the key benefits of the new Shipyard format? Basically, you have a way to separate sequences now from stages, or even have multiple sequences per stage. You can have individual and custom tasks in every stage and in every sequence. You can link stages and sequences together like you want to, and you can have multiple parallel stages, which we will see in an example later. Okay, that's it for now. This is the Shipyard specification. If you're interested in more, please subscribe to this channel. There will also be a video about examples for this new Shipyard format.